next day, Winnie and I came home, back to where we'd started. It was the 4th of July in that little suburban town. Somehow, though, things were different. Our past was here, but our future was somewhere else. And we both knew, sooner or later, we had to go. It was the last July I ever spent in that town. The next year after graduation, I was on my way.
Paul! Hey, Paul!
Hi!
So was Paul. He went to Harvard, of course. Studied law. He's still allergic to everything.
Thanks a lot.
Listen, I'll be right back. Hang on one second.
As for my father, well...
How you doing?
Good.
Welcome home.
we patched things up.
Norma?
Hey, we were family. For better or worse.
Hey, sis.
One for all,
Uncle Kevin.
and all for one.
Eskimo.
Karen's son was born that September. I gotta say, I think he looks like me. Poor kid. Mom, she did well. Businesswoman, board chairman, grandmother, cooker of mashed potatoes. The Wainer stayed on in furniture. Wood seemed to suit him. In fact, he took over the factory 2 years later, when Dad passed away. Winnie left the next summer to study art history in Paris. Still, we never forgot our promise. We wrote to each other once a week for the next 8 years. I was there to meet her when she came home, with my wife and my first son, 8 months old. Like I said, things never turn out exactly the way you planned.
It's good. It was a good fourth.
Yeah. So you're gonna be a grandpa, huh?
Not bad.
Gray hair and everything?
Yeah, soon enough.
Growing up happens in a heartbeat. One day you're in diapers, next day you're gone. But the memories of childhood stay with you for the long haul. I remember a place, a town, a house, like a lot of houses. A yard like a lot of other yards. On a street like a lot of other streets. And the thing is, after all these years, I still look back with wonder.
Yep. Hi, Dan Lauria. I'm listening to Monday Morning Critic.
So this is just simply coincidence, okay? This 4 years ago today was our first interview, the exact day. How weird is that, the way it shook out? You know? And for those listening, I want them to know this. Like, so we had our interview. I had technical issues, so the whole interview was like, it was you couldn't listen to it. It was just a bunch of screeching. It was my end.
What else is new with Zoom?
Yeah, but listen, hold on. Though, Dan, I called you. I said, Dan, I'm having issues. I called you back, and I said, Dan, this happened. You go, Derek, No problem. Let's do it again. So this is actually like our third interview. You were kind enough to do that. You're kind enough to come back. Dan, thank you for about 10,000 things. So thank you for that.
Well, it just shows I don't have a life. There you go.
Oh, come on. No. That's not it at all. Let me ask you. So the first interview, we touched on how you're a veteran, a football guy. You know, your career coming up to this. I want to break each of those down just quickly here for you, Dan. Are you a follower?
Oh, you went in and out. I'm sorry, Derek. What?
Okay.
You went in and out.
All right. How is it now? Is it okay?
Am I what?
Is it okay? Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll come back with that. So what I said was,
can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound great. You were okay. You're okay. Yep. So one of the things I said was, like, in our first interview, was that you're a veteran. You're a big football guy, an actor. Do you follow the NFL ritually? Do you follow it every Sunday, football?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I would normally follow it anyway, but after playing Lombardi, I kind of have to. I still get calls sometimes. They want, what do you think Lombardi would say? Usually around the Super Bowl time, I get a lot of sports shows call.
Yeah, I would say that, like, Lambeau Field would have you on for every big game, right? Because I mean, the job that you did, the appearance, like, you're just uncanny when it comes to being Vince.
Well, yeah, and it was also, Vince Lombardi. He taught physics and chemistry. So when it comes down to the injuries and all that, and the injury reports, he actually could have read them and understood them. So. I mean, I think he would have said the problem is inevitable. We have advanced speed and more weight, and that's going to cause a problem. So you have to understand that in order to tackle the problem. Plus, there are drugs to enhance weight.
Yeah,
and I think he would have gotten rid of because a lot of them are legal. I'm not talking about illegal drugs.
Right.
And there are sports where one drug is illegal, and the other is the same drug is legal in the other sport, and it goes back and forth. And I think he would have pushed for just the elimination of everything.
Yeah.
And because we're what are we going to do? Just keep getting bigger and faster, and you're going to get more and more injuries.
Yeah, I mean, and you played, football, and like I said, for those listening, it's just, and I wonder what he would have done with things like CTE and concussions, how Vince would have looked at all that stuff, right? Because, like you said, super bright guy. Like, he's not this, like, old school. I mean, he was old school, but he was a bright old school guy.
Oh, yeah. He was, I don't know. I think if he, like poor Willie Wood, he had such dementia at the end of it, I think that would have broke his heart to see that. And I just think he would have taken a more scientific approach. I don't know if you know what Joe Namath has been doing with this. They've developed a thing, because the American Medical Association hasn't approved it yet, where they feed oxygen into the brain of the older players. And it's actually, they've had a great success rate with it. It's just revitalizing the cells in the brain. And I think Vince Lombardi would have jumped on that right away. He would have followed the science.
Yeah, I mean, you look at those players, Dan, like you mentioned, Wood, but like even like Mike Webster or like Junior Seau, they took it's like, to watch their end. It's like, what are we doing here? Like, I mean, to hear what you're saying makes me happy, because at least we're doing something about it.
Well, they're trying to, Derek. You Google Joe Montaigne and his research into the brain injuries, and you'll see this thing about introducing oxygen into the cell. And, I think the problem is it's so easy, and there's no chemicals or drugs involved. It's a natural thing. So, there's always a resistance from the money makers. It's always follow the money.
Yeah, that is true. It is. It's follow.
What the issue is, follow the money.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to mention is, before we get into two particular entries in your filmography that I really want to talk about, is your influences, because maybe people didn't hear the first interview, but I really think this is important, right? There's three. You have a lot, right? But there's three that are, to me, that I was just like so fascinated by. There was Jack Klugman and Charles Durning. And you're the second person to mention Charles Durning's names, by the way.
Really?
Yes. There was an actor in a baseball movie, and I'll have it by the end of the interview. But he mentioned Charles Durning as like, this guy really was influential. The other person I want to talk about that I really was fascinated by in our first interview is your Aunt Adele. I really think that is the coolest, like, because I know, and I want to get into this separately, but like you used to have like a gathering at your house on Sunday nights, but I don't want to get into that just yet.
Yeah, we haven't had as cold.
Yeah, but I feel like that some of that came from your Aunt Adele because but anyways, talk about Aunt Adele and Jack and Charles, and say whatever you want, Dan. Say as little as you want, whatever you want to say.
Well, when I was in high school, my Aunt Adele came and lived with us. They were on hard times, and I wasn't much for studying and homework, so I'd get home after practice and I'd be eating dinner, and she'd say, "Go to bed, go to bed," and I wouldn't even question. I'd go to bed real early. And at 2 a.m, she'd wake me up and go, James Cagney or Humphrey Bogart, and we'd watch the old Late Show. And she knew all the lines, and they were such great stories that, you just fell in love with the story. And after a while, some of the guys I played ball with would kid me about, because I knew who all the actors were. And then when I went to college, I was literally telling a joke on the football field, and Constance Welsh came up to me. She was the woman who started the Yale Dramat, and at the end of her career, she was teaching at Southern Connecticut, which was only like a mile from Yale. And she tapped me on the shoulder pads and said, "Would you like to be in a play?" I said, "I always wanted to do that." And she went, "I know." I said, "How would you know?" She said, "Because I'm the greatest teacher in the world." So that's how I got involved with acting. And while I was in the service on leave one day in uniform, I went to see Charles Durning in championship season. And when he came out, I was there getting an autograph, and he came right, because I was a veteran, he came right over, see me in uniform, and I said, "Yeah, Mr. Durning, when I get out, I'm, going to try the acting thing." He goes, "Well, look me up. I'm sure he just said that, But when I got out, eventually I got in touch with him, and because I was a vet, he helped me with a play I wrote that we eventually got to off-Broadway. And then we had a group called Vetco. We were all Vietnam vets. We expanded it to all veterans. And Charlie got involved with our group, and he's the one who introduced our group to Joe Papp.
Wow.
So Charlie, from the very first day that I went into New York as an actor, Charlie has been an influence. And I don't know if I told you the story last time, but every time I did a play afterwards, he would put his arm around me and go, "Another 20 years, you'll be an actor." So,
that's great.
And it was always that way. And then when I came out here to LA, I produced Bronx Tale, the play. So De Niro bought it from me. I didn't really want to produce, but Charles Durning said, "Okay, well, what are we going to do now? We can't just stop, So we started a reading program where every Monday night we read a new play to help writers get literary agents. It went on for 10 years. We did over 480 plays. And because of Charlie and Joe Mantegna, we really there was always a big name reading. Like Tom Hanks never read, but he directed the 3 readings that Rita, his wife, was in. So we always had great people.
Yeah.
And through that, I eventually I went back to New York, and I did an episode of it was a show about firemen, and I met Jack Klugman. And Jack said, "Oh, I heard about you. Charlie Durning told me you still do the readings." And I said, yeah, you got to get involved, So he conned me into doing a revival, because the last line of my bio is, "Dan doesn't do plays by old dead white guys." He made me do The Price, but the deal was he had to do 2 new plays. And he did one with Charlie called Golf with Alan Shepard, they were just great. But then I did one with him called The Value of Names, about the House Un-American Activities Committee, 3-hand. And we got nominated for everything in LA.
Right.
And so Charlie and I and Jack, we'd always go to dinner. Charlie, Jack, me, Peter Falk, and Dom DeLuise.
Wow.
So great group to be with. So I'll tell you this other story. We're doing the value of names. We had Monday and Tuesday off. And Sunday matinee in the audience is Peter, Dom, and Charlie. And Jack, he came running back in. He goes, "Now remember, you got to do it for us, not for them." And I went, "Jack, what are you going to do? Shave my send me back to Nam? Relax." You always say, once I said, "You were good tonight." He goes, "We're always good. That's not what it's about." I said, "Come on, don't. They're our friends." And he goes, "You're right.
Yeah.
So we had one of those magic nights. I can't explain it. But while we're bowing, Jack said, "We got to get the boys together, find out what the hell we did right tonight." So
Wow.
Tuesday night we go to dinner. Great stories, and then very emotionally, Charles Durning put his arm around my shoulder and said, "All right, another 10 years you'll be an actor." And I said what I always said, "Yeah, Charlie, I'll keep working on it." And then Jack, he leaned in, the great Jack Klugman leaned into the great Charles Durning, and he said, "Charlie, are you an actor yet?" And Charles Durning leaned in and he said, "Jack, I'm getting damn close." Peter Falk reached over and went, "I think you're there, Charlie."
What a dinner that was, Dan. Holy cow, some of those names.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes I'd bring a young writer just to hear the same stories all over again.
I've heard, I had Adrienne Barbeau on last year, and she said,
she's a sweetheart.
Yeah, she said Dom DeLuise was maybe one of the nicest people she's ever met.
Oh, nice. And I'll tell you, it was hard to bring Dom around Jack Klugman because Dom would say hello and Jack would fall down laughing. So
yeah, the other thing you said that was interesting. Well, it was all interesting, but about the Bronx Tale, you sold to De Niro, who then makes it into a movie. Correct? Is that how that works?
Yeah, I mean, when you produce a play, you have certain movie rights that they gotta. It's not a great story the way that we were treated, but it at least put me on the map with other actors, knowing that if I called you to read a play, you might get lucky.
Right? Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
We had one reading. It was called Thanksgiving. Unfortunately, the playwright passed away. It really never got produced. But it was 4 old gay men that had Thanksgiving together. One hadn't been there in 3 years. Or no, it was a little more than that, like 10 years.
Yeah.
And my 4 old gay men were Charles Durning, Rod Steiger, Jack Palance, and Robert Mitchum.
Wow. Talk about heavy hitters.
The worst rehearsal I've ever sat through. Because all they wanted to know was what the narrator was going to say.
Yeah.
And he mumbled a lot. Even Charlie would never mumble. He was just, they read a joke and Charlie read the setup and Mitchum had to punch and they mumbled it. And then they looked at me because I was directing and he goes, "Oh, we'll get a big laugh tomorrow night on that. Don't worry." Come on. And I'm like, just because they're great actors, don't mean they can read,
Yeah. I never would have expected that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a 90-minute play without an intermission. And I'll tell you, Derek, we did over 480 readings. That might have been number one.
Wow.
When you thought they rehearsed for 10 years. They were such pros. And there's no blocking. It's basically sitting in chair. And at one point, Jack Palance, who I didn't know, that was literally the first time I met him. He jumped up, and Charlie Durning was sitting next to him, and Robert Mitchum was on the other side of Charlie Durning. And Jack Palance jumped up. He was the guy who hadn't been there in 10 years. And he goes, he points at Mitchum, and he goes, "You cheated on me with that fat little bastard." And Mitchum, who was pretty sick, he died like 6 months later.
Wow.
Jumped up. I thought he was going to take the roof off. I never, in any movie I've ever seen, I never heard him that loud. He screamed because he loved me. And Charlie Durning stood between him and started crying, going, "Don't fight over me. Don't fight over me."
Oh my
So
God.
I mean, I'll tell you, it was such an emotional night. So stupid me, I go backstage afterwards and I went, "You guys were great." And Mitchum looked at me and said, "What'd you expect?" And then Palance walked by and went, "Rookie." And then Charlie went by, put his arm around me, said, "I told you, another 20 years, you'll be an actor." So they were that old school, you know, they loved performing. They didn't like a lot of notes. You know, I mean, Steiger wanted to talk more. He would have discussed things, but
right.
the others, you know, just like Charlie Durning said, it was called a play for a reason. We're playing, we're having fun, and they loved every minute of it.
Yeah. You know, I feel like there's not an appreciation, Dan, for as great as some of these older movies are. Some of these actors that you're naming, I feel like now we're just like Netflix. Let's get a show out. And I'm not saying all the stuff on Netflix is bad. I'm just using that as an example. I feel like it's very much like cookie cutter fast food, whereas the people you're talking about, the movies that you have talked about before, are like the 5-star lobster dinner. Like, I feel like times have changed. It's not all bad. I'm not like trying to, date myself, but I do feel like there's a lack of appreciation for some of the actors and movies that came before us.
Yeah, there's definitely a lack of respect for the art of acting because of all the mass editing. If you take some time and look back even 20 years ago, 2000, and look at all the colleges that have theater departments, and then look at them today, over 75% don't have theater departments. It's called communications department. So kids, young actors come out of colleges having never done a play, but have made a bunch of 10-minute movies. Well, you don't understand how you sustain a character. And, now we're into self-tapes for jobs. They're asking people like me with 50 years in the business to self-tape while they have offers out to bigger names who aren't self-taping at all. It's just a total disrespect for everything we've done. And the casting directors are being eliminated. And the directing, especially on television, has become every show is the same. I can go on the TV right now, put on the most popular shows, and you'll see a master shot where everybody comes in the room and it's cut immediately to whoever face is talking. And then the master shot is used for the last line sometimes. So with talking heads, what you're doing is the chemistry between two actors is between you and I. And as soon as I cut from your face to my face, I've cut the chemistry.
I get it. Yeah. That would seem like it's less authentic that way.
Right. And when I started in the business, we did 2, 3, 4-minute scenes on television without a cut. Yeah. Whenever Jackie Cooper directed me and Tyne Daly and Cagney and Lacey, I did like 8 of those. As soon as he saw me with Tyne, he'd go, "Oh, my 2 horses are here." And we'd walk through because we knew our lines. We studied, we worked. They didn't have to call us. I'd go right to her trailer. Let's run the line. We'd come up with bits. And then we'd shoot it in one, and he'd go, "You guys happy? I'm happy. Let's go home." And he would get a pat on the back from the producers, and the crew would love it. Now the equipment is lighter, it's more efficient, and we're taking twice as long because they want every line on the single. And it's exactly what Charlie Durning taught me years ago. It's never been about money, and it never will be. It's about power. The people with the money say, "It's my money. I want what I want." And the creative people are saying, "Yeah, but you're hiring me because I have a vision of what it looks like." And now there's no more argument. The money owns the editing machine. So I can't tell if people... I told Lin-Manuel Miranda, he directed that TikTok, and they talked about the young man, who's a very good actor, about how he learned to dance. And I said, I can't tell if he can dance or not. It's cut on every step. And then I showed him, Fred Astaire and Eleanor Powell doing that tap dance from Broadway's 1935. It's almost 5 minutes without a cut. I said, I know those two can dance.
Yeah. Do you feel like the acting has changed, Dan, over the course of your career? Other actors?
Yeah, not so much the ones from the theater. I mean, they're the ones, that's why I always go back. But I think the ones on television, I don't want to mention any names, but I got a guest spot on the show, and the lead actor, he whispers.
Yeah.
So I get there and he I watched the years when I was little, So we rehearsed and he was great. So now we got to shoot it. And my good friend who's on the show is a regular show. I don't want to give his way to him because then you'll know the show.
Okay.
I said to him, hey, this kid's okay. He goes, yeah, wait. And now I'm laying in the hospital bed and this guy's sitting on the end of the bed. They yelled action. We couldn't have been 3 feet apart. I could not hear him.
Wow.
So I literally, because I'm old and I don't give a shit. As soon as he whispered, I went, what? He goes, well, I'm an internal actor. And I said, well, I'm a human being. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
If you do something in order to, that means you're acting. And I was always told to Charlie, the only rule you need to know is don't act.
Right.
When you feel you're acting, you're doing something. Even when you create a big character like Lombardi, you got to get that voice and all that into a natural tone. You can't just, I don't get it, Derek. It's beyond me. So
no, but I hear what you're saying. We mentioned those movie nights. What were those like, Dan, on a Sunday night? Do you just like pick a random movie that how did that work? Because it sounds so fascinating to me.
Well, we used to have again, it was on Sunday night. Sometimes it'd be 5 or 6. Sometimes it'd be 20 here in my living room. And I would put on an old movie, and most of them don't like, acting is so subjective, but there were some great older actors that I don't think got credit for how good an actor they were. Tyrone Power was one for me. So I put on Nightmare Alley or The Razor's Edge, and or Anthony Quinn in Requiem of a Heavyweight, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house. They love those movies. They got to get beyond the black and white. And I would sit there and go, okay, watch the scene, yell out when it cuts, and there'd be 3-4 minutes before they saw a cut, and they went, wow.
Wow. 1917 was like that, Dan. Did you see that, the Sam Mendes movie?
Yes. There's subliminal cuts in that. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much. I just didn't think it had much of a storyline. Right.
I agree. But like the cutting part got me thinking about you in our first interview, but yeah, that's so for me, you're an actor, so you have appreciation for all types of movies. But for me, Shawshank is the best movie ever made. For me, but would you put that in your top 10?
I think Shawshank's a great movie. And one of the reasons why I think it's great is because women like that movie also. And there's only one woman in it. It's a dead body.
Good point. Yeah.
So it is universal in its story. It's about how we need each other and hope. And no matter how far down you are, you got to fight for life. And when your movie transcends all these obstacles and becomes a universal theme, then I think it's a classic. You'd be surprised at some of the bad reviews it got.
Oh, it bombed at the box office. I remember seeing it at the theater, Dan. I remember I was gushing. I saw it 3 times over opening weekend. I cried harder each time. I couldn't believe, Dan, that somebody created something so beautiful. I still to this day, at almost 50 years old, I cannot get over that movie. That movie hit me like a Rocky punch. I can't get over it.
Yeah, a good movie will do that. It'll stay with you. I see the movies now. They're good, and I'm not knocking them. But I always ask myself, 5 years from now, will I even remember a scene from this movie? And there's very few. Whereas Shawshank, there's so many scenes.
Many.
And simple scenes, like when they were sitting with their backs on the wall and he gives them the harmonica and talking about get on with living. And it was good stuff and good actors, a good ensemble.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
don't see that much anymore,
And one thing that drives me nuts, Dan, is I was, for the podcast, I'm always on social media, the websites for TV and movies. And I got to tell you, like it was yesterday, somebody's, Jordan Peele is a talent. I'm not saying he's not. But when I hear like the next Hitchcock or Genius, like, how can you say that after 2 movies? Like, I'm not saying he can't end up here, but I feel like we're so quick to say this one's the next that one's the next in football. Joe Montana.
Yeah.
It drives me nuts, Dan. Like, I'm not
saying there. I know exactly what you're talking about there, and one of the examples is when Tia Leone, who came on the scene. She had done a couple of movies a week, a couple of guest spots. They gave her a series, and they said she's the next Lucille Ball. Lucille Ball was 25 years. She worked with everybody from the Three Stooges to the Henry Fondas. And what I thought was, because Tia Leone is so sweet, she's such a nice person. I thought that was so unfair to her.
Yes.
You can't. 30 years, you're just what you're saying. You're going to give a couple of games and say you're the next Joe Montana. That's not.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, one guy was saying, I go, Get Out is one of the movies, and it's a good movie, but he's like, yeah, it's as good as Shawshank. I'm like, you're out of your mind. Like, this is why I have to get off the internet sometimes, because I just go insane. Like, this Shawshank Redemption creatively is one of the most beautiful movies ever made, any generation, any era. But I'm going on a tangent here. Dan, the other thing I wanted to ask you quick was, you mentioned Tom Hanks earlier. Do you think he's our greatest actor ever?
Well, I don't think he would say ever. I don't think he would want you to say ever, because he's so dedicated. I only worked with Tom Hanks once, and not as he was directing me. So
right.
And I always tell people, you hear these stories about how nice Tom Hanks is. Well, in real life, he's even nicer.
Wow.
He is just a gentleman. I hope he directs more. I would give my right arm. I mean, I'm not with a big agency, and they usually package stuff, but I would love to work with him. I'd like to work with him on stage. My buddy Peter Scolari, who passed away this week, he got to not only work on Bosom Buddies with Tom Hanks, but he also worked on stage with him. And everybody,
he was a great actor too. Peter Scolari was fantastic.
He was the Mickey Rooney of my generation. He could do anything.
Yeah.
Sing, dance, juggle.
He was with Tom on Bosom Buddies, right? He was great show. Way ahead of its time too. Great show.
Yeah, and they remained friends. And Peter would tell you, Tom, he could pick up the phone and Tom call him right back, no matter how busy. He's just one of those. I mean, I've been lucky. I had people like that through my career. People like Charlie and Jack, and the interesting thing when you talk about Charlie and Jack. Charlie was 89, Jack was 90. I was in New York doing A Christmas Story. I literally was in the room when Charlie Durning died.
Wow.
And I went to the theater, and I had to call Jack Klugman. And on the phone came up Jack Klugman. And I answered. I didn't say hello. And I answered, and I said, "How did you know?" And it was Jack's wife, Peggy. And she said, "Know what, Dan?" I said, "I was just going to call you to tell you Charlie Durning passed away." And I heard her drop the phone on the floor, and she picked it up and said, "I was just calling you to tell you Jack passed away." They passed away the same day, 4 hours apart, Christmas Eve.
Oh, what a gut punch. Oh, my God.
So I called Paul Lieber, who handles a lot of the Broadway PR thing. And I said, "Paul, Charles Durning and Jack Klugman just passed away 4 hours apart. Is there any way we could dim the lights on Broadway for the two of them, And I'll never forget, there was a long pause. And then Paul Lieber said, "No, we're going to dim the lights 2 nights in a row, one for me." And it was the only time in the history of Broadway that the lights were dimmed 2 nights in a row for 2 actors.
Wow. Talk about impactful. Wow. What a great story, Dan. Wow. Is there an actor now, Dan? My last question before we get into your filmography quick. Is there an actor today, a younger actor that you're really taken back by, that you're really impressed by?
I am. I am a lot in the theater. Like
Yeah.
Billy Cluep is doing another play. He's unbelievable on stage. I mean, there's so many good actors I see on stage. In the movies, I think there's good actors if they get the right material. I think Leonardo DiCaprio is very dedicated.
Yeah.
Brad Pitt, he's having physical problems now, but I thought he was very dedicated, and of course Tom Hanks, George Clooney. I think George, he's again one of those nice people.
Seems like, yeah,
he's so self-effacing and everything, but I'd like to see him get a good role and really challenge himself. Because I got a feeling he would shock a lot of people. So there's a lot of good actors out there.
Dan, I talked over you.
Joe Williams, what an actor.
Dan, I talked over you. The first person you mentioned, was that Billy Crudup? You said the first person you mentioned, was that Billy Crudup? Yeah, he's got a great show on Apple TV right now. He is a fantastic actor. Yeah. That's a name
but you ought to see him on stage.
Really, that good?
You ought to see Christian Slater on stage. Christian Slater on stage he's a force.
Yeah.
And not what he normally plays on the TV shows. So.
Because you couldn't get any more different from stage to television. You couldn't ask for a bigger difference in acting, right? I mean, it's like night and day.
When I started, it wasn't.
Yeah.
And Charles Durning always said the best thing that ever happened to all of us is when we worked in those little theaters where the front row was 3 feet away from you. He said, because when you get on a set, don't do it for the camera. Do it for the crew, who is usually like 4 or 5 feet away.
Right.
And that'll come through the camera that you're doing it for them. A lot of people say, "Oh, I got to be smaller. I got to be that." No. You play the house you're in. Play for the people there. It's got to come through that it's for the audience.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So March 1st of 2020, I went to go see a movie and I was blown away. Obviously, March 20th, the whole world shuts down for the next 2 years, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
I was so taken back by The Way Back and how good this freaking movie is. Like, I almost feel like it is the virus killed this movie. If this movie was released in any other year, people would have been paying more attention to this movie. I'm going to tell you, this movie is as good as a movie as I've ever seen. And I had the filmographer, Edu Grau, on the show. Fantastic job. I had an actor on the show.
Right.
Dan, when I saw you on screen, I almost jumped out of my seat. I was so happy to see you. But talk about The Way Back. I haven't heard you talk about this in maybe in other interviews, but what a freaking one of Affleck's best movies, Dan. I'll say that right now.
Yeah, I thought so too. But actually, some of the people in the bar, we had a much bigger part. I only had 1 or 2 lines in it.
Right.
But it was all, they rewrote. We never even shot. Sometimes they shoot it and gets cut. We didn't even get to shoot it. But the director was very nice to me. He said, if I had to do it over again, you'd be the old coach who took him home and everything, because they had to cut out dialogue in that. But I thought that Ben Affleck showed. Well, I think Ben Affleck showed how good an actor he was in Good Will Hunting. I just think he did one where he played Steve Reeves. I think he got, because of life and our journeys and then directing, and then he got sidetracked. But I think the movie you're talking about may make him realize he should concentrate a little bit more on acting. Maybe he should do a play. I always think that all those guys, it would help them if they do a play. Now, Robert De Niro would disagree. He did one play, Cuba, and he hated it. He just didn't like doing the same lines over and over. Alan Arkin doesn't. I like the curtain goes up and for 2 hours, you're somebody else.
Yeah.
Many times we got to do it again. I could do Lombardi. We did 286 shows. I couldn't wait. I loved Wednesday. I got to do it twice.
Wow. Yeah. And I think part of Affleck in this movie was, I feel like on screen, we were seeing some of what he was going through off screen. And he's admitted this, the difficulties he was having. So I don't know. The movie cut deep with me. I loved it. Like I just the virus killed this movie, and that's so unfortunate. But the way
Another movie you may have, if you've seen it, and a lot of people haven't. Again, COVID. But when George Clooney directed Ben Affleck in Tender Bar.
Oh, it's a good movie. It's a good movie. Yeah, I agree.
It's about real people. We're not blowing up things, and you and I are a little like the old story.
Affleck plays like the wise ass uncle, right?
Right.
That's a great movie, Dan. That's a great movie.
Yeah, and George directed that. George Clooney directed that. I thought it should have got more attention, but again, it was during COVID. And, a question I like to ask critics is, two questions. What movie did you see years ago that you panned and now think, I didn't get it right? It was a better movie than I thought.
Yeah.
And what movie did you hate? Yeah. And what movie, did you love, but now you go, you know what? That wasn't as good. Didn't hold up over time.
You know what movie the movie I don't like.
That's my questions to you.
All right. So Dan, I'll answer that. The movie that there's two that I disliked that everyone loves. I'm not a fan. One is with Jeff Bridges, The Big Lebowski. I never understood it. It was never for me. I love Jeff Bridges. He's I love Jeff Bridges. The other one was Clerks.
Another nice person.
Yes. The movie for me, the Coen brothers are involved. It's a great, I just didn't get it. It never connected with me. But the other one would be Clerks with Kevin Smith. I never got that either. That was never for me. But the one
but now have you changed your mind?
No, not on those two. I'm trying to think if there's a movie that I've come around on. Not you didn't ask me this, but a movie that I think has gotten better with time. I've always loved it. Is Jeremiah Johnson with Robert Redford.
Yeah,
like that movie remember when Leo came out with that what's the movie he won an Academy Award for? The Revenant. The Revenant. The Revenant. Yeah, that was Jeremiah Johnson in the 70s. So I'm going to think about that. That's a good question. A movie that I didn't like at first. That's a good one.
And what made me think of it is I knew a couple of. I played cards with a critic here in L.A. And when I asked him that, he brought up Shawshank Redemption. He said, I gave it bad reviews. I never liked it. I don't understand. Blah blah blah. And the other day I saw it and I said, you know what? I missed it. So over time, he realized he had given a bad review to a movie that has sustained time. So then I asked him, well, what movie did you love? And he said, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Oh, that's a good one.
He said, I loved it. And now I look at it and I go, it's just not that strong a story and everything. So he would give it a bad review today.
So I can tell you movies that have gotten stronger with me. Like I love them, but now I love like Tom Hanks's Road to Perdition is just one of his top 3. It's one of the greatest movies. It was Newman's last movie, but it's one of the best movies ever made. Like so, there's movies like that that get like better with me that I've loved. But I don't know. I just think there's so many terrific.
Yeah, I think Road to Perdition was one when it came out. I just thought Tom Hanks needs a tougher role, but as time's gone by, I said, no, he did it just right. It's a good movie.
Yeah. So in our first conversation, because I always think of editing since our first conversation, you said you watched Argo and the editing drove you nuts. And I was going to ask you if you ever got a chance to speak to Ben in The Way Back, because Ben was in the movie. I don't know if you guys crossed paths.
No, I never. That was the only time I've ever met him, and he was very, I heard he was a little tough to work with, but not with me. He was very, very polite, very professional.
Yeah.
He's not a backslapper. He's not, but he was very professional. He liked what I did. At the screening, he came over and he said, boy, for a little part, you really held a bar together.
Wow.
So, and then, I'm hoping I'll work with him again. No, I thought he was very professional. I don't mind. Tom Hanks is he's almost too nice. He comes over, he talks to you. He likes to be with the actors. He likes to talk about acting. Ben Affleck wasn't like that, but he knew his lines. He was on time. He was very dedicated to what he and the director were constantly working together. I know. I respect that. You know?
Yeah. Does editing like that, like so in Argo, does editing like that, because you know more about movies than obviously I do, can that ruin a movie from not as an actor, but as a fan watching a movie, Dan? Can that take away from a movie for you? Editing, like choppy editing, like not choppy, because Argo's great.
Longest take in Argo with two actors talking in the same frame is 27 seconds.
Wow, that's quick. Whoa.
And it's with Ben Affleck and Bryan Cranston. Now, you can't be a better actor than Bryan Cranston.
No, he's great. He's great.
Yeah, it's the scene where Ben Affleck is sitting eating lunch with Alan Arkin, and there's 6 setups. It's only about 3 pages. It's actually a very well-written scene. There's 6 setups, and I can't count the number of cuts. Now, if I'm doing a scene with Alan Arkin, I would say, put the camera over there. Go have lunch, guys. Just let it roll.
Yeah.
And the magic happens, you know. Well, they take all the magic out with all this mass editing. But, again, the people who own the editing machine have total control. I mean, they're told on TV shows right now that every line has to be on a single shot. So even if you did shoot a 2, me and you, they want each line on a single. So whoever gets that editing machine cuts it back and forth. And then they say they have no attention span. They ought to come over here and watch the young kids watch an old movie. You know?
Yeah. You know, one of the things I've appreciated, Dan, as I've gotten older, are things like cinematography. Like that means a lot to me when I watch a movie. You know, when I watch a movie and I see a beautifully shot movie, like I'm already in. I mean, I know there's writing, I know there's acting. I get it. I get that. But I've learned to appreciate and love cinematography, Dan.
Yeah, but you got to admit, the older cinematographers, when you had a bigger canvas, when it wasn't just a tight headshot.
No, I agree. I mean,
you know, James Wan Howe and all those great ones. I mean, Allison in the film noir movies. You know,
Roger Deakins is still kind of like that. He's that old school guy that's still working, you know, kicking ass today. You know, he's doing a great job. You know.
Yeah, I wish they would let him expand the canvas a little bit more, and I don't know. It's, again, if you go from head to head, like Charles Durning always said, if I cut from your head to my head, nobody has to be good. You don't have to be good. I don't have to be good, because we'll shoot it until one of us gets it right. And the camera guy doesn't have to be good. The focuser doesn't have to be good. If they had dolly grips anymore, they wouldn't have to be good. Nobody has to be good. As soon as they leave it in a 2-shot, everybody has to be good.
No, you're right. No, I get it. I wanted to end the interview talking about, obviously, the Wonder Years. A lot of people interested. A lot of my Facebook posts, people are really interested in our conversation today. Thank you for all this time, by the way, Dan. I appreciate
whatever
that.
You want.
Yeah. You know, so I have to tell you, I love Jack Arnold so much. Sometimes I confuse Jack Arnold with my dad, the memories. Like that's how much I love your performance as Jack Arnold. Do you ever get sick of people like me gushing about how wonderful you are as Jack Arnold?
Well, no actor likes to hang his hat on any one hook.
Right.
But if you have to, the Wonder Years is a pretty classy hook. You know?
Pretty damn good. Pretty cool hook to be on. Yeah, I agree.
The credit really goes to Neil Marlins and Carol Black, who created the show. They were there for 18 episodes. But then the rest, 112, that was Bob Brush was the head writer. And even Fred will tell you that the real star of the show was Bob Brush. He worked himself to death. That's why the scripts were so good. You have to have the writing. And in the Wonder Years, we had the writing. Now, there were some where I wish they wouldn't have cut it up so much with the editing, you know. But at least they left some scenes alone.
You directed an episode in season 3, didn't you?
Yeah, I was supposed to direct one every year. And when I directed, it's the only episode that had a scene without a cut.
It was called Night Out, the episode. Night Out. Yeah.
I actually directed another one that had 2 scenes with no cut. But I said, take my name off. I just leave me alone. If you're going to make me cut and do all this shit, the crew loved me. They were like, let's get out of here, boys. You need another take? No, I don't either. Let's go, you know.
Dan, you know who's like that is Eastwood. Eastwood is, all right, let's do it. We got it. Let's go. We're off. Like that. Yeah. Eastwood is very much like that.
Well, if you're working with professionals like a Charles Durning, he never understood page counts. Like, we're going to shoot 9 pages today.
Yeah.
And it's going to take all day, you know. And Charlie Durning said, you could shoot 20 pages with me and Dan, and we'll be done before lunch.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you got 10 people in a room, you got to do all the coverage and all that. So the page count is there, and Eastwood knows that. And I would give my right arm to work with him. Everybody said, you would love him, Dan. He goes in and he just respects so much if you come in prepared.
Yeah.
You know your lines. And he said, okay, Dan, I need you to walk through the door here, and I need you to confront them there, you know, and you do a take. He usually does 2 takes and says, okay, let's go. And a lot of the scenes where he does do a long oneer, he will do the old school, is what they call cut to the cat in the window. And what that means, if you and I do a long scene and the director wants to keep it in one, say we're in a nightclub and there's a band playing. Well, obviously when we're shooting, there's no band playing.
Right.
But then the director will take a shot of the band, because if he wants to use the first half of one take and the second half, you cut to the cat in the window, which is the band.
Yeah.
And so they say Eastwood does that once in a while. He'll do a long thing and say, okay, let's do another one. And all right, boys, let's go home. But then he goes back or has a second unit guy do a cat in the window in case he wants to come back.
Yeah.
But he's the old school. He comes from Don Siegel and those guys, you know.
Yeah. And you know, we talked a little earlier about, you know, the internet, you know, they always have polls. Who's the best 80s dad, 90s dad? It's always been Jack Arnold, Dan. And I'm telling you this as the truth, as you know, as somebody who I admire. Jack Arnold has always been the best. I mean, always. Like, and I don't care what anybody says. It's not debatable. Jack Arnold is the best TV dad ever. Dan, do you agree?
They had a survey. I think it was on Father's Day out here in LA. It was, I must be 15 years ago now. They said, what TV dad would you like to have as your dad? And I wasn't even on the list. And then next year they had, what TV dad was most like the dad you had? And I was number 1.
There you go. There you go.
Nobody wanted me, but everybody had.
That is such a great poll. That is such a great poll. Yeah. So your dad in real life was a truck driver, right, Dan?
Oh yeah. He was. My parents, nicest people in the world.
Did you get any of Jack from your dad?
No, not really. My father was very mild mannered, you know, and my you know, he worked really hard. That part, you know, everything was for his family. That's part of Jack Arnold too.
Right.
My father was, you know, when they have these actors sit on a dais and they talk about their lives, and a lot of them had problems as kids, broken. Tom Hanks got living in a car.
Yeah.
Then they get to me, and it's so boring. My parents are the 2 nicest people I knew. I didn't even know we were poor till I got to college. I didn't know you got more than one Christmas present. You know, that's just the way it was.
Yeah. You know, but that's a sign of great parents, is that when they keep you in their world, like that's great parenting, Dan. Oh
yeah. I mean, I used to love when my father would come see me play in a sport. You know, it always made me try a little harder. And you want, so it was. No, I was very lucky. My mother was the funniest person I've ever known. She can make anybody laugh. You know?
Yeah. You know, I got to tell you, we talk about modern day shows. There's 2 shows we really like, but I got to tell you, as good as they are, I can't remember what I saw in the last episode, but I could tell you word for word the words in the scene with Kevin and his dad in that last, you know, montage, which I'll talk about in a second. But like, it's amazing. The Wonder Years went from 88 to 93. I remember almost every single episode like I lived it. I can't remember what I saw yesterday with some of these shows on TV today, Dan.
We were shocked that we were canceled. We were 27 out of 166 shows, and we were canceled.
Wow. Top 25 almost. Wow.
Yeah, we were. And that was only because they moved our night. We were number 1 for 2.5 years. Then they moved the night, but we were never in the 30s. And we were canceled because of one person, Ronald Perlman, the guy who is the president of Revlon. He bought New World Productions and he sold everything off. And even Bob Iger, who was our champion, who's another great guy in our business, he said, even if I stayed, Dan, I couldn't have saved the show. The guy was such a jerk. He was trying to rob him. And then he tried to blame Ted Turner, who bought the residual rights. And Ted Turner never made public statements, came out and said, hey, I would have bought 200 more. And Perlman issued a quote, the amount of profit didn't warrant another season. And we wanted one more season because the show was always intended to end with Fred graduating. And we're waiting for him to get accepted into college. You know, where my wife and I are planning another honeymoon. And he finally gets accepted to college and comes in and finds me on the floor dead. Because in real life, Neil Marlins, his father, died very young while they were playing tennis. And that was going to be the end of the Wonder Years. Now, most of that stuff is in that narration you're talking about. But we didn't know it was going to end. Bob Rush didn't know that was going to be the last show until the show before. We were in shock.
Right.
We thought we were going to do at least one more season.
But
and
what
the
you're
actors got together and offered to come back without.
Wow. No. You were saying,
the actors offered to come back without a raise. The crew got together, and I've never seen this in 50 years in the business. The Teamsters went and said, do 12 more episodes. We won't charge you any more. And they still didn't do it.
So we hear it in the ending, Dan, about, what happens, but you're saying there would have been another season where we actually saw Jack on the floor or Jack.
That would have been the last, but you would have saw the other brother taking over the business and becoming competent in it. Everything they talk about in that. Winnie going to a different school than Fred, and was all in there. So
I love the way that you get along with the cast, even to this day. I love hearing those stories. I can listen to you talk about the entire cast and your rapport.
I'm waiting to hear from Allie right now because I wrote a play that it's gonna be produced this summer in the Berkshires and at Shadowland Stages in the Catskills, and I want Allie to do it with me. So.
Well, listen, if you're in the Berkshires, I still owe you a beer. We have to have this beer. So I am 35 minutes from the Berkshires.
Yeah, I'm going to be there the first couple of weeks of August.
Oh, that's going to work out perfect.
We'll get together. We'll come see the play. We'll hang out.
I will. A few more questions for you. The ending that you mentioned, I got to tell you, even though it was premature, I'm going to tell you that I loved it because it was the closure. And a lot of times I look at you the way I look at my dad, right? It was the closure that I wish I had with my own dad. But the music, that music, it's from The Natural, Randy Newman. I don't know. It was a premature ending, but it could have been worse, and I loved it. I just love the way you and Jack and Kevin just sit for that beer or for the soda, and they just I don't know. There's something really sweet to that. There's something really beautiful to that.
Oh, sure. We all remember when the first time we had a drink.
Yes.
All guys do, and I'm sure all the girls remember having a drink with their moms. Don't let your mom know.
Yeah. So outside of the writing, Dan, why do you think the show connects with so many people? We're talking about this show. People are talking about it in 2023 still. Yeah. Why do people talk about this show like you just saw it yesterday? Why?
Well, I talked with what's his name who created Brooklyn Bridge, and he said to me, why did your show work so well and ours didn't? And I said, well, most of these kid shows have made a big mistake in that they make the kid smarter than everybody else, parents and half of the Wonder Years ended with the narration, Fred saying, if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have done that. So it's a learning process show. I mean, hey, look, young Sheldon is successful as hell. He knows more than everybody else in the show. But my friend Wendy Malick's on that show. But I think the reason why the Wonder Years worked so well is because we saw a young boy learning the lessons of life. And that's universal, and they're the same lessons 100 years from now. It'll still be there.
And Dan, I love the way you took that character and like the little things, like when you would just groan like or say
Bob Rush used to write, Dan does groan 102. That was
and he would grunt. He'd say, huh? Like, and the great line that I always use in my own life now is highway robbery. Jack would always say everything's highway robbery, right?
Yeah, I always get the one work.
So the other thing I want to ask you is, this is for those hearing this for the first time, they're going to be blown away by this. The fact that Jack and Winnie only have one interaction in the whole series is unbelievable to me, Dan. That's unbelievable. How did that happen?
Believe me, I didn't know, but there is one time. It's the episode where Winnie finds out her parents are going to get divorced. And I walk into the backyard, there's like a party going on, and I go, "Good evening, Winnie." He goes, "Oh, hi, Mr. Arnold." And I walk away. That's our only lines we ever had. But a lot of the storylines were Fred coming to Dad about, "Oh, you won't believe what happened with me and Winnie." You know, one of my favorite scenes is when he comes in and he implied to his friends at school that he and Winnie might have had something sexual going on. And he said, "Come on, Dad, you know how women are." And Winnie's taking it the wrong way. And I just sit there and he says, "So what do you think, Dad?" And I said, "Go over to Winnie's Cooper's house right now, get on your knees and beg her to forgive you." And I just walk away. And Fred yells out, "You think she would?" And I go, "I wouldn't."
The other thing I said in our other interview was, I said if they ever remade the show, I'd go nuts. Did they have? So it's a good show, but couldn't they have made the same show without using the Wonder Years brand? Couldn't they have made it using whatever? Did they have to do that, Dan?
I think there was talk about bringing it. Well, they brought it back as a black version of the show.
Right.
And Bob Rush and I talked. Of course, my character is gone, and I said, "Well, if you let me write it, I would. How I would. Jack would go in the backyard and look at the stars in the telescope." That was in a couple of episodes. I said I would have Fred be me with 3 kids. Allie's remarried now, and at the middle of the show, he goes in the backyard, and there I am on the swing going, "See, you thought I was an asshole. You're doing the same thing." I'd be that ghost in the backyard that never left his consciousness, and kind of set a moral tone. And Bob Rush, he said, "Oh, I like that idea," but he said I couldn't get anywhere with it.
I'll end with this. There's a guy I've heard you brought up in interviews. His name is Skip Cook.
Skip was our head grip. Yeah.
So tell me 2 things quick, Dan. What is a head grip? Because I don't want to Google it. There's things
he's in charge of our crew.
Okay, gotcha.
He's not the head electrician, but he's in charge of all the guys who bring in the sets and get everybody around. And Skip, big guy, Vietnam vet. He was 6'4", weighed almost 300 pounds, and but he wouldn't allow any cursing on the set when the kids were there.
Wow.
He was that old Marine. Yeah, let's get this right, and of course, as soon as the kids left, we were all cursing like sailors. But he would put his foot down if things got out of hand, And I love Skip. He passed away now, but I just thought he brought a real nice atmosphere around the young kids. It's hard for the kids. They're going to school. And it's hard for people like me and Allie. Like every time you saw a close up of us talking to the kids weren't there. We were talking to X on a chair, and Skip was always the one making sure everybody was quiet, let them concentrate. We had a very good controlled set.
Yeah. If you're the best dad, she's definitely the best mom. I'll say that. She was just a phenomenal. She is still a phenomenal actor. Yeah. Great actor.
Still working. And I just did a play with her. I guess it's a year ago now in New York. I'm hoping she'll do my play. So I love it. Allie's great.
Which of the kids gave Jack the biggest run for his money? Kevin, Wayne, or Karen?
What gave him his biggest run for?
Yeah. So which of Jack's kids gave him the biggest run for his money? Maybe pushed his nerves.
That's the simplest question in the world.
Okay.
My favorite episodes were me and my daughter.
Karen. Yeah.
Aaron was the one. She was of the new world, a different generation. I couldn't intimidate her. She knew I'd never slug her. The kids were always working. The boys were. And I always tell everybody, if I had to pick one, there were a lot, but if I had to pick one episode, it was when she went to college and I gave her my duffel bag from the Korean.
Yeah, that's one of the best episodes. Dan, speaking of the best, you're one of the best actors on the planet. You're still kicking ass and
trying.
Yeah, listen, I didn't get a chance to say goodbye to my dad, but we are having this beer and we're gonna do this in August.
I'm looking forward to that. Yeah,
Dan, take care of yourself.
You'll get to meet Allie too.